Supporters of a ballot measure to expand legalization of marijuana in Massachusetts have been trying to strengthen their case with an appeal to social justice. Helping to make that case is a new report by the American Civil Liberties Union. It shows continued racial disparities in arrests for marijuana possession and sales, even after the start of decriminalization 7 years ago. To tell us about the report is our guest from the ACLU Massachusetts, the field director, Matt Allen. Thank you very much for being with us, Matt.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
In Massachusetts, with decriminalization for certain amounts of marijuana, if they're small enough, certainly the total arrests are down, but what about the breakdown racially on those arrests?
That's absolutely correct. Since decriminalization, total arrests for marijuana possession went down about 90%. Now we see about 600 arrests for possession a year and about 1,000 for sales. However, the racial disparity within those arrests is still very great, with black people about 3 times more likely to be arrested than whites, regardless of the fact that rates of marijuana use are the same across races. And in fact, in some counties, the disparity is worse, up to 10 times or more. Black people are up to 10 times or more likely to be arrested than whites in those counties.
Well, one thing we've already heard from some of the prosecutors who oppose the expanded legalization is that you shouldn't look at these arrests as, police going up to someone who's just smoking a joint. I mean, these are people who might have been arrested for other things heaped on as well, and that because there was marijuana, that was just added to the pile. So, I mean, is that something that could be, the prevalent picture?
Well, we've certainly heard stories of people who have been arrested solely for marijuana possession. The way this data works is that it's categorized by lead charge. So if someone was arrested for multiple charges, they're listed with the most serious charge. So if someone was arrested for a charge in addition to marijuana possession, it was an offense that was less serious than the marijuana possession. So we're not talking about people who are committing aggravated assault or any serious crimes.
Now, one of the other things that could happen is that someone could be arrested for possession, and later on they figure out that there wasn't enough there for it to be treated as a criminal matter, but I guess there's still a record of an arrest.
That's correct. Criminal records are generated at arraignment, so someone might even have their case dismissed or found innocent, and they're still going to have that arrest record, which can be a huge barrier to employment, housing, or education. And I think one point we don't hear from the opponents so much is our criminal justice resources that go in to fighting the war on drugs outside of arrests. I mean, we've seen some cases just this summer in Massachusetts, out on the Cape, and in Western Mass, in Amherst and Wendell, where there were senior citizens, 81 years old, grandparents who had just a few plants in their backyard. They noticed helicopter flying low overhead. Their property was then raided by state police over just a few plants. So this is an outrageous waste of criminal justice resources, and Question 4 would make sure that those raids stop.
We're talking with Matt Allen from the Mass ACLU. Matt, another way, I guess, attacking the findings here is that, even if we expand the legalization so people can use marijuana for recreational purposes, that, there would still be some kind of arrest going on possibly too.
Yeah, there absolutely could, because even under Question 4, there's still limits on how much people could possess. So if they exceed those limits, they still might face arrest. But I think the overall takeaway is that passing Question 4 would mean less arrests, which would mean less people in handcuffs and less criminal records.
Talk about the impact in the black community, because there were black leaders taking part in the press conference recently about this, because an arrest, for marijuana possession, it might sound like a small deal to some people, but talk about the community impact.
Well, certainly. At our press conference that was last week, we heard from Rasan Hall, who is the ACLU Racial Justice Director, also from City Councilor Tito Jackson, from retired Judge Leslie Harrison. All these folks were talking about how just one minor infraction like this, because it's on the criminal record, and often even if that case is dismissed or it's sealed or the person is found innocent, that doesn't make a difference to an employer or a landlord. So another thing a report found is that young people, those under the age of 21, are more likely to be arrested and are disproportionately arrested than older folks. And those are the people who are most susceptible to those negative outcomes.
What about figures on the use of marijuana in states where there has been the kind of legalization contemplated here? Do we know how much that has changed?
We do, and I'm glad you asked that, because again, that's something that our opponents really point to, alleging that legalization in Colorado has led to higher rates of youth use. The fact is, that's not what the data says. If you go to the Colorado Department of Public Health, and again, there's a link to their report on our webpage at the ACLU, it says very clearly that youth rates of marijuana use remain relatively unchanged. And we also, I mean, that logic plays out here in Massachusetts, where when we decriminalized an ounce or less of marijuana in 2008, we heard from district attorneys and others who opposed the change that we'd see skyrocketing rates of youth use and crime. And yet, here in Massachusetts, youth rates of use remain the same. So this allegation that legalizing marijuana is going to negatively impact our youth hasn't played out. And one of the reasons is, by reducing the size of the black market, we actually reduce access to youth, because drug dealers don't check IDs, whereas these marijuana dispensaries have to follow the same kind of rules that liquor stores follow, where they're not allowed to provide marijuana to anyone under 21.
Well, you know, what I've heard anecdotally in recent years is that what's sold in the black market is stronger than the stuff that was prevalent when I was young, and it's still maybe sort of unpredictable. You don't know what's mixed in with it sometimes.
Well, certainly for adults who want to use marijuana responsibly, under the regime that will be set up under Question 4, they will now be able to get marijuana that they know has been tested and it's free of adulterants. There was a case here in Massachusetts last year where police found someone selling marijuana that was actually sprayed with fentanyl, the very addictive and dangerous opioid. So there's certainly benefits to responsible users knowing that they're going to get a safe product.
We should mention you have this report online as well, so people can check that out.
That's correct. Our new report is on the ACLU website. It's at aclum.org. /question 4. And that's a numeral 4. And that's the website of the ACLU of Massachusetts.
Thank you very much for being with us. Matt Allen from the Mass ACLU. In a moment, a chance to have your say on a long-range plan for the T.